Thanks for tuning in to the Women's Vibrancy Code, a podcast dedicated to helping women move from exhausted to energized, balance their hormones, and feeling turned on by their life, their lover, and themselves. I'm your host, Maraya Brown. I'm a Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, keynote speaker, and self-made entrepreneur. I'm the founder of my signature program, the Women's Vibrancy Code. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about your energy, hormones, libido, and embracing your feminine power. Oh, and you might want to have pen and paper to take some notes on some of these episodes. Welcome, welcome. I'm Maraya Brown, and I have with me today Mr. Alex Mandossian. The title, which is going to be really fascinating to see where our conversation goes, and if we stick to this title that we chose, is Marketing Friction, a silent assassin of business growth. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And I remember when we first met in Austin, you looked the same that you did in high def than you did in person. So congratulations. Yeah. You're optically perfect.
Well, I will say, people off, I don't know, but often what I hear is that in person, people are surprised at my height. Oh. I'm curious if that was your experience.
No, not at all. Because I think I'm 6'6", but then people get surprised in the elevator or by my voice on my podcast. And they go, I thought you were a little taller. And I said, blame my mom. She was 5'2", or is. My dad was 6'3". I split the difference. So there you go.
There you have it. All right, let me read Alex's bio and then we're going to get the show on the road. So since 1993, Alex Mandossian generated nearly $417 million in sales and profits for his marketing students, clients, and joint venture partners on 6 continents. He's best known by international thought leaders for teaching students from evolving nations, third world, how to profit from first world digital marketing strategies. Fascinating. He's the best-selling author. Harvey Mackey acknowledges Alex as the Warren Buffett of digital marketing because of his ability to make money for his students and joint venture partners. He has shared the stage with Richard Branson, Larry King, Tony Robbins, Marianne Williamson, Robert Kiyosaki, Susie Ornard. I don't know who's that one?
Susie Orman?
Yeah.
She's in the financial field in the news.
Okay.
You're a bit younger, so it's Harvey McKay. So okay. It's interesting, but if you mispronounce, I'll just tell you what they told me that is how it's pronounced, okay?
Great, thank you. You're welcome to step in at any point.
Okay, cool.
Mikhail Gorbachev, Dalai Lama, and 2 U.S. presidents. And as a virtual trainer with over 22,000 hours of training time and nearly 4,800 interviews, Alex's lifetime goal with his colleague, Jack Canfield, is to influence training 1 million other trainers by his 77th birthday. Mm-hmm. And Alex, how old are you today?
I've got 2 years left.
I don't believe you.
You're right. I make my 60th turn around the sun on March 9th, 2024. So I'm turning 60 as of the time of this recording in less than a month.
Okay. So 17 years to go to influence training 1 million other trainers. Mm-hmm. And how close are you to that point?
Over 550 million. It may have been not enough of a moonshot, but I'm going to still keep it because 2 commas is good enough for me.
Wow. And yes, we got to meet in Austin. Alex runs an amazing mastermind called Pathfinder Mastermind. Well, used to. Is it done? Is it still happening?
I ran it starting in 2011. And unlike many athletes like Michael Jordan or others who have retired too late in their lives, I decided to retire it at its peak. So that was the final year. And now I go back and we have reunions at other events at Wizard Academy because Roy H. Williams is my marketing mentor. And so I just get a pack of Pathfinders along and we meet, and we're doing one coming up. And it's a really good place to go. It's very unusual. It's very difficult to describe, so I won't even begin to try.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for inviting me. It was a privilege to be there, and I loved the experience.
Yeah, you're a great addition, and you contributed greatly. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, marketing friction, a
Mhm.
silent assassin of business growth. What does that mean to you?
Well, first, let's talk about why people don't look at friction. Now, when you talk to someone, and I've been doing this 31 years, I started marketing online 3 years before Google was even born. The two founders met on Stanford campus, and I started marketingonline.com in 1995. So technically, ostensibly, factually, I'm a BG digital marketer, which means before Google. Before Christ is BC. BG is before little God, Google. And
Hmm.
as a result, I've seen a lot. I've been very blessed to have been part of many innovations. I came from nothing, a 1,200 square foot home in Pasadena, California. The only claim to fame I have is where I lived growing up with my parents and my sister. It was 2 blocks away from where Einstein lived 50 years prior, and he used to walk to California Institute of Technology with his ideas, and that's where I used to walk as well, trying to be Einstein. But if you ask someone, "Hey, what do you need most in business?" They say, "I need more leads." More leads. What are those? Well, I need more prospects. Really? Yeah. Um, and then I look a little deeper because I'm a fractional CMO, and rather than being hired for, let's say, three or $400,000. For 10% of that, I'm hired for 10 months, for 3 months, for 10% of that amount. And then we move the needle just as fast. And then like an $85,000 a year marketing manager takes over. So that's been my model for many, many years. And so when I look at what people really need, they don't need more leads, because when they get more leads, it's going into a leaking bucket. There's leads, let's say, is the water, and it's leaking out of the bucket because they're not converting. Do they need conversion? Yeah, they need better sales conversion. They could always use a better sales process. Um, but that's still not the number one thing that they need ultimately. They want it, but that's not what they need. And then scaling, they want to scale, and they think scaling means growth. Scaling is not growth. Scaling, Maraya, is growing without the founder. And most people don't know how to do that because they're entrepreneurs and they are the bottleneck. And I've seen it many times. I'm just as guilty of it over the years. The thing that any entrepreneurial CEO or founder, solopreneur, business owner, the thing that they need and should want most, but I'm not going to should all over them today, is they need to remove friction. They need to remove the friction and lubricate the buyer's journey, because without the buyer, they're not in business. So basically, forgive the double entendre, they need friction lube, which is what I'm going to provide today.
Right. I'm laughing because many of the episodes are around libido. And so I'm
Oh,
like, okay, we've already mentioned lubrication. So you're
well,
speaking my language.
I love that language. If it's okay to talk about it, my best client is a labial plastic surgeon, so I get
Okay.
to talk about it all the time over there.
Yeah, it's one of the most common plastic surgeries done today.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to see where we're going to go, but because this is a health and wellness platform, at least my podcast,
Mhm.
and a lot of the work that I do, would you say that when we think about friction and the CEO or the entrepreneur being the bottleneck,
Mhm.
is part of that friction our lack of prioritizing our wellness and the mindset piece that gets in the way?
The answer is yes. And convincingly, it's been a yes. I've been fortunate enough to have gone through a training over 25 years ago called Lifebook, which was developed by a friend of mine, John Butcher, and now taken over by Mind Valley from a former student and now a close friend, Vishen Lakayani. And the Lifebook has 12 dimensions of life. And like anything, like relationships, financial, health, etc. But the place where we always started with Lifebook, and I believe in my life, is not my mental game, is not my physical game, is not even the level of fitness, but it's my general health. I flatlined in 2023. back in May of 2023, not long ago from the time of this recording, because I contracted valley fever, which turned into double fungal pneumonia, and everything stopped. I was an elite athlete, competing at my age level and at two different age levels beneath mine, like 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60. And now 60 and above, the 30-year-olds weren't touching me back then. And I'm blessed to have a little bigger heart than usual and larger lungs than usual. But after I got sick, I was bedridden, and I was there for about 9 months, lost every client. And basically, without the reserves, I would have to pull my kids out of college. I have Brianna and Gabriel. They're 23 and 21. Gabe is older, my son. Brianna's 21. They go to UCSB, University of California at Santa Barbara. And without health, nothing is left. So through a circuitous chain of events, and the medical community couldn't do much for me. After all, they did kill George Washington, bloodletting him. I went to naturopaths, I went to chiropractors, I went to healers, Chinese, all different sorts. And finally, I found the right recipe at a place in Sedona called the Sanctuary. And I was admitted there for 35 days, got to know the whole process, very spiritual, a lot of Native American training there in the spiritual sense, also with the I Ching and European spirituality as well. And they just put the whole thing together, which spoke to me. It doesn't speak to everybody. And I actually started to get better. And now I'm in full health at the time of this recording. I was supposed to be bedridden for 2 years. It's kind of like having Lyme's disease. That's what they call valley fever. Most people don't even know what it is, but it turns into something else. Like HIV doesn't kill people. It's what HIV causes that kills people, right? Mm-hmm. So without the health, nothing happens. And I felt friction full on because my bacterial doctor wasn't communicating well with my pulmonary doctor. My pulmonary doctor was not communicating with my cardiac doctor. I had high blood pressure for the first time in my life. And because of the business friction, marketing friction, medical friction in the scheme of things and in a broken system, and very expensive, by the way, between the insurance and the appointments and everything else, you're dying and you have an appointment in 2 months. That friction almost killed me. Mm-hmm. And if the friction wasn't going to kill me, the medication was. I took this antifungal called flucosanol, and my hair was getting lost. Oh my God, I had a full head of hair. I was so proud of that, thanks to my mom. My dad was bald. And, I lost it. So friction can cause death. It's not just a business term. It can cause a lot of disruption. And all it does is it needs to be smoothed out so everything works effectively and efficiently in a business, in a family, in a medical situation, and between relationships. When there's friction between relationships, there's a problem. And usually it's unspoken, but there's a miscommunication, there's an unmet expectation, or maybe a misguided intention that causes friction. I'm talking about it in the business context today. Yes, friction does matter, and it impacts every walk of life. And that's the first place to start if you have a business, is friction. Not new leads, not more conversions, and not scaling. Get rid of the friction, because that will make you profitable faster, better, and easier.
I love it. So just to call a spade, friction can be health, like you mentioned. Friction can be our love life or our lack of love life, our relationships, our home environment, our finances. And then today we're talking about friction from a marketing perspective, calling a spade that it's not a lead generation thing, but it's actually marketing friction that is getting in the way of profitability. And so I'm looking forward to digging into this.
Mm-hmm.
Who should listen? So for those that are kind of peeking in and they're going, wait a minute, what is this? This is a little bit different from Maraya's podcast. Who are we speaking to?
Yeah, I don't want to be different. I want to be unique. So this may be different as far as topic goes, but if you can, in your mind, as you're watching or listening right now, or maybe even reading, how can I relate this to the most relevant thing in my life right now? So friction in a relationship is a disruption of some kind. Every rose has a thorn on its stem. There's a reason for that, right? And so every business has a thorn and every business has a founder. So if you're a business founder of some kind or an entrepreneur, um, then you're unemployed, basically. I mean, you set your own hours, and there's a lot more friction between your human resources that you have, even if you employ one person, probably with your family, friction with the roles you play. I'm a
Mhm.
father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend, I'm a leader, I'm a role model. I'm even in some um, in some areas, I'm a healer.
Mhm.
And I've just I just got that distinction, and it was assigned to me by someone else. So uh, friction is very relevant in all walks of life. So if you're a business owner or you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, this is for you. If you're a W-2 wage earner, this is for you because friction makes your job harder. Friction makes it harder for you to report to your direct report or for someone to report to you. You may be causing the friction without even knowing it. I believe every business is a reflection of themselves. So your business is a reflection of you. Your family's a reflection of you. Your relationship is a reflection of you. I never believe in 50-50, and I don't believe in balance. Balance, nothing happens at balance. I'm holding up both my hands, and the scales are balanced when they're not moving. What happens with balance? Nothing. There's no movement, and movement is life. Nothing happens until something moves, said Albert Einstein. So I believe in harmony. So if we're in relationship, when you remove the friction, it means that, hey, when I just have the capacity to give 10% because I'm sick or I'm groggy or I'm just on edge, then you're willing to give that 90% to make up that 100. That's called harmony. So I believe in harmony, not balance. And then when you're giving 10% or maybe 20, I'll make it up and I'll go 80% or 90%, whether that's doing the dishes, taking out the garbage or driving the kids or whatever it is that we're doing. Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Once that decays, once that collapses, then the friction starts showing itself. And once that happens, then in a relationship anyway, once contempt raises and rears its ugly head like a whack-a-mole, over. That's the one emotion where if you've studied it, and it's famous studies that are out there, contempt is the thing, not anger, not hurt, not grief,
Mm.
contempt. And so I don't want you to have contempt for your business. Familiarity breeds contempt. You've heard that saying. Mark Twain, Sam Clements Mark Twain was the pen name. He said familiarity breeds contempt and children. So he was a funny guy. And what's important about what friction is people are kind of lazy to look at the friction. Like
Mhm.
there's a quote by a psychologist, Nobel Prize laureate. He's the author of Thinking Fast and Slow. His name is Daniel Kahneman. He said, thinking is to humans as swimming is to cats. They can do it, but they prefer not to.
Yeah.
Okay, so
They
that's
they'll
what
do
friction
everything they
is.
can to stay out of water.
Yeah, I mean that's what friction is. Like you can remove friction in your life. You just prefer not to because it's a headache. It's just one of those things that it's a crack in the dam. But you know what happens with the crack in the dam? If you ignore it, the whole thing
Yeah.
explodes. So hopefully
Okay.
that relates to anyone watching or
Yeah.
listening to the
So
reading.
let's get into it. How does someone lubricate their marketing friction and actually go out and I love your hat, sell
Thank you.
some high ticket and make some money?
Well, first thing is there's no friction between low and high ticket. So let me make that statement because that's my expertise and that's what I get paid a lot of money for. And I'm a high ticket consultant. So, for example, let's say you speak to 100 people a month. And I just said, no matter what, you're going to speak to 100 people a month. And I don't care what the conversation is, you speak to 100. And you have an offer that's $100. But you're really good at closing, you're good at sales. And you say, Alex, I'm going to close 50% of them. You say, okay, go ahead. I say, go ahead and do it. And you do it. And you close 50% of those sales, which is 50 out of 100. And for $100 at 50, that's $5,000 US, which ain't bad. It's above the median income in the United States, but that's a lot of work and you're a really good closer. Now, let's say you had a $10,000 offer. Let's say your self-esteem and self-image allowed you to have and gave you permission to have a high ticket offer, and you did whatever it took to get that sale. If you were rejected 98 times, Mariah, you'd make $20,000. If you sold two $10,000 offers, you would make $20,000 rejected 98% of the time. And of the 98% who said no, you could have $1,000 offer, maybe of whom 10 could say yes. That's another 10K. That's 30K. Okay, so now you've got 98 minus 10. You got 88. Of the 88, how many people will buy the $100 deal? Let's say 20 will, just for shits and giggles, if it's okay for me to say that, right?
Yep.
Well, if 20 is $2,000, now you've made $32,000 just for having a $10,000 offer. You're having the same number of conversations. So friction is provided by low ticket because you have no other option. But if you go high ticket, even if you don't have the offer, like even if you don't have it, try to sell it. If they say yes, you will fight like hell to create that offer in time, and it'll give you a rush of an adrenaline, dopamine, oxytocin, and every other neurotransmitter that makes you happy in the world, not to mention endorphins and serotonin.
You've got most of them. That's pretty much all the ones I can think of.
Yeah,
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that number one, entrepreneurs can be the bottleneck to their business, and number two, the marketing friction is predominantly showing up with people improperly pricing what they're offering.
that's one option, right? There's going to be friction no matter what. It's an absolute certainty. And if you look at where's friction in your personal life, then you're going to find where there's friction in your business life. If you're not a personal person and you're all business, great. If there's friction in your business life, when you have a personal relationship, you'll find friction. I'm holding a rock right now that says everything is a mirror. And I believe that. That's not just Buddhism. It's true. Everything is a mirror. I'm holding up a pen in my hand right now. Now, if I were to ask Maraya, what is this? She would say, of course, it's a pen. Rhetorical question. Great. Now, let's say that I'm showing this to a Cocker Spaniel that's about 6 months old. What do you think the Cocker Spaniel would do with this pen that we call a pen? That's what we're projecting on this thing. What would the Cocker Spaniel think it is?
Well, it would smell it,
Yeah. And then what would it do?
pee on it.
Possibly. The most Cocker Spaniels I know, which are fairly smart, they would call it a chew toy.
A chew toy.
And then if we went back several hundred years, a 13th century Eskimo would look at this thing and they say, well, that's a very, very archaic ice pick.
Hmm.
But the Eskimo wouldn't say it's a pen because they don't have the karma or the consciousness to project that onto this object. So we just assume it's a pen,
Or
right?
paper. They probably wouldn't have paper to utilize. I mean, can you use your pen on an igloo?
You couldn't, but the pen wouldn't have been invented because there's no reason for it. The
Right.
Eskimos have 17 words for snow. We don't, right?
Hmm.
Why? Because that's the culture. I know the Mayans, when the ships started showing up from the conquistadors, they didn't recognize them. They'd never seen one. At least that's the
Yeah.
way the story goes in the history book. So friction always shows itself. It's always there. Everything is a mirror of your experience. So when I say everything's a mirror, the reason you say this is a pen is that's your experience. That's the karma you're projecting on that thing. Without getting too esoteric, this thing, the pen, is empty. It has no intelligence. It was invented for purposes for humans. But then if you go to a dog, who's right? Eskimo, 13th century, who's right? They're all right. So that's how you look at friction. It always rears its ugly head, and the goal is to remove it. That's the key. Friction also causes great things. Friction caused the Grand Canyon. Friction has caused some of the greatest athletes of all time because there's friction when they're lifting weights. Friction has caused the continents to divide, right? So friction is both positive and negative, but as it relates to relationships, as it relates to mental capacity and doing business, friction gets in the way of that slithering, beautiful buyer's journey from point A to point B so that you
Hmm.
can create more lifetime value. Let's go to Jeff Bezos because he knows how to remove friction. I'm not a big fan of his politics, but he says, when you reduce friction and make a task easier, people do more of it. Now, this is a guy who was a stockbroker. He graduated from Princeton, summa cum laude. He's the Amazon founder. He's also an astronaut. And there's another guy named Ralph Welborn, Welborn. He says business growth historically across all industries comes from tackling friction. Okay. He's the innovative consultant and futurist and best-selling author of Topple, whether you've heard of him or not. Here's the key. These are very smart people. And if they're saying friction is the reason for business growth, then I would definitely listen to them, at least abide by their advice. And what's a friction lubricant, Maraya? Simple. A friction lubricant is an actual strategy or tool that smooths out the KFPs. Now, you've heard of KPIs, key performance indicators, right? That's a term we use in marketing and business, KPI, key performance indicator. Well, a KFP is something I made up, key friction point. And if you can smooth out your key friction points along the buyer's journey, you can double your customer cash flow without any paid ads or acquiring a single new customer, client, patient, member, whatever you call them. So that's how important this topic is.
Hmm. Okay, so for anyone who is wanting to attract more customers,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm hearing is it's the friction that is in the way. There's areas in which friction is beneficial, it's inevitable. But where can we reduce the friction? And that's in acknowledging the key friction points and coming up with specific strategies. Number one being pricing. And
Pricing
it
is
sounds
big.
like,
Yeah, pricing is a big strategy. I'll give you a very simple one. Have you ever been you've been annoyed as hell because you can't find a parking spot?
yes,
Okay,
kind of. I don't
great.
mind walking.
Let's say Whole Foods, okay? Those guys are like terrorists. If they can't find a parking spot, these people
Yes.
are, they're supposed to be so mindful and present, but man, they get pissed if you take their parking spot. Well, when I went to Australia and I used to have property there for 10 years, well, when you go into the mall, there are red lights and green lights. And so a red light means the parking spot is taken and you're looking all the way down the aisle. And so I don't go down that aisle if I see a line of red. But if I see a few greens, there's no friction. I go there and I haven't wasted any time. That's friction. If you've ever forgotten your passcode and you're not logged in, you go, oh man, which passcode did I forget? That causes friction. If you've
Right. And
ever
then my passcode to my last pass, I can't even find that.
That's called friction. If you've ever been irritated or frustrated with um, trying to get online because the Wi-Fi is not working, that's friction. If you've ever been in line at Starbucks because you can't, for some reason they think they're selling drugs or something, they are, I guess, and you're waiting about 30 minutes just to get a cup of coffee, and then all of a sudden you miss your flight at the airport, that's called friction. I don't like waiting in line for that anyway.
So
And
what
then
are
if you're
some, what
waiting
are
in
some,
line if you're waiting in line for Disneyland
yeah.
for a ride and your kids are needing to pee, and then you got to get out of line and you lost about an
Oh.
hour's worth of work, that's called friction. So what does Disneyland do as a friction lubricant? They give you a fast pass. Do you have to pay more for it? You do. What does Starbucks do? They give you call-in privileges with an app so you can go in and pick up the damn coffee, right? And what about passwords? Well, there are these password apps where it'll remember the password for you. Those are friction annihilating lubricants. And I'm
Yeah.
just naming a few. I have a ton more, but these are things that everyone knows who's watching, listening, or reading. It's just something you haven't thought about in your personal or professional life.
Okay. So the silent assassin to business growth is friction in your health, friction in relationship dynamics, friction in things that uh, take your time, friction in the buying and selling process because you're pricing it incorrectly and spending way too much on ads with a low price thing versus what I'm hearing is potentially let go of paying all the money on the ads, increase your prices, have just as much effectiveness with sales, and then have a system and a funnel to then communicate with those that don't buy the high ticket thing.
That's accurate, but even more simple than that is going back to the same shopping cart you go to all the time and it's not pre-filled. Although you bought there again and again and again. It's so frustrating. It's a waste of time, energy, and money. That's what friction does. It
Mhm.
wastes time, energy, and money.
And if we put ourselves into the mind of the typical buyer, let's say, let's separate it out. So there's the high ticket buyer, the one that is accustomed to a more concierge experience. Let's put that aside for now.
Mhm.
The typical buyer Do you think that the typical buyer even questions the 30 minutes waiting in line at Starbucks
Yes.
or the passcode being lost or the
Yeah,
fact that they went into their cart and it
they
wasn't
do.
pre-filled? They do.
They do. Just like the spouse who gets beaten by the other spouse and still stays there. Just like the kid who gets beaten by the parents and still stays there. Those are horrific things. But they deal with it because they believe they're necessary evils, and whatever
Mm.
childhood trauma they haven't resolved, they're still living with it. Mark Zuckerberg, again, not a big fan of his politics, but he's done a lot of good when it comes to social networking. Harvard dropout, founder of Facebook. He said, our goal is to make it so that there is as little friction as possible having a social experience at Facebook. Now, listen to this not so fun fact. Now, you know what a shopping cart is, Mariah, right? You go to Amazon.com, 24 cents out of every dollar is spent there. So you know what a shopping cart is. It's kind of like the cash register at the store. Are we clear? Everyone who's watching, listening, or reading knows what that is. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So check out the sheer magnitude of e-commerce of what friction can do. And this is 2016, which is almost 10 years ago. Okay. I don't have the latest, but you can double it. In 2016, e-commerce sales hit $2.1 trillion. So there were $2.1 trillion of online sales. Okay. A lot of it was Amazon. But of course, there's eBay and all the other platforms in China and overseas, et cetera. Now,
Mhm.
of the 2.1 trillion sales, which means that they actually checked out at the cash register, listen to this. The sales number of 2.1 trillion, which other than the United States is beyond every single gross domestic product you could possibly think of. I mean, Russia, US, even China, I believe, right? I may be wrong, but let's say it's in the top three of what a country would produce in gross domestic product as in revenue. 2.1 trillion, that's just online sales. This massive sales number pales in comparison with $4.6 trillion of merchandise left unpurchased in the e-commerce shopping cart.
Huh.
That's like two and a half women or men turning over their shopping cart at the store when they get to the cash register after they've shopped for an hour.
Why?
That's what friction, because of friction. That's what people can do. The place to remove friction first is at the shopping cart. They're at the moment of truth. They got their credit card. They typed in their name, phone number, address, everything, and they didn't buy. That is the key friction point that I always have my clients. You're going to save $30,000 just if you do this, if you have a business. Go to your shopping cart. You will be shocked that 8 out of 10 people leave even though they pick something to purchase. 8
Fascinating.
out of 10 people. And you know why it's a silent assassin? Because no one knows or gives a shit. What I want is for people to give a shit because it really matters.
Hmm.
It's good for economy. You want to be all in. I'm holding a rock that says all in. And that means like in poker, you're all in. There's no friction with all in. There's no more betting, nothing. You either win it all or you lose it all.
Wait, but why would a consumer put it in the cart, be in the process of entering their credit card and jump ship? Is it fear of change? Like what is happening in the consumer's experience at that
Why
point?
would a woman go into a dressing room, try on 20 things, and buy two?
I buy what I love.
Right. They buy what they love too. They leave 18 things in the cart. They do business different than you. The moment you assume everyone is like you is the moment you go broke. Or if you're a parent, you'll have skinny kids because you won't be able to feed them.
You're funny. Huh. Okay. So what you're suggesting is that business
I'm not
owners.
suggesting these are facts. These
Okay.
are
So
facts. So assume that they're not like you. I'm saying that when someone comes to your shopping cart, if you have one,
right.
at least 1 out of 2 is leaving the shopping cart without purchasing, and they've already chosen that thing.
So what does the marketer do to shift it?
You have a better buying experience. It's called the CX, the customer experience, the
Mm.
CX. You have a better experience from first touch to final touch. It's not just about purchasing in the transaction, it's that relationship that goes all the way through. People who come through me buy 90+% of the time because of the experience. When you went to Pathfinder Mastermind, that was filled 11 months before. You happened to get in because someone dropped out. Why is that? Because of the experience. Now, can you convey that experience to someone watching or listening or reading right now? Not really, because it's a very special experience. It's different and we don't do it anymore. But when that customer experience is so special, they will not leave. Imagine if you never lost a customer. That's the world I live in. I still have customers from 22 years ago. I'm lazy and I don't mind being lazy and wealthy at the same time. But you need to live into our mantra at Marketing Online is caring is a competitive advantage. And you can't fake it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when you say trust me, it's like bullshit. Trust me. That has to be experienced. Look, I had two kids. They were teenagers. I know for a fact that experience is not the best teacher. Experience is the only teacher. And I'm a single dad. I will never date a woman who's never had kids. Now, that's my own bias. And the reason for that is because they have no clue in one part of their lives what that's like. And so a divorced mom with empty nester kids, would be my ideal. Does it always happen that way? No. But that's a preference for me because I don't care if you have nieces, nephews, whatever. If a child hasn't passed through you, you don't have that experience, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's powerful. And the matchmaker in me is like, ooh, who can I think of? um,
I'm a
okay.
gentleman. I'm a gentleman, believe it or not. I don't know how I'm coming off here, but everything I'm saying is not my opinion. It's factual.
Yeah.
I'm pulling these from hard tested facts because my opinion doesn't matter. In fact, I go back to an author. I don't read fiction books, but in high school, I went to Loyola High School in LA, which is a parochial high school it's a Jesuit run school. And I'm not even Catholic, but it was a great school and I did quite well there. And I read a book by Tom Robbins called Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. And
Mm-hmm.
my favorite quote out of that book is, I know nothing. Everything is sacred. I know
Mm.
everything. Nothing is sacred.
Yeah.
And I remember that indelibly etched in my mind and in my heart.
That's beautiful. I smiled when you mentioned Tom Robbins. Jitterbug perfume is what got me through West Africa.
I'm sure it did.
Speaking of West Africa, I just, can we pivot a little bit because there's a piece in your bio
Wherever you want.
that jumps out. So, okay, we've talked about friction and all the various ways it can show up in our lives and get in the way and slow down progress. I love this concept, not concept, these facts
Mm-hmm.
around the buying process, the selling process, and where friction is, and this concept, this fact of individuals leaving their filled up cart and not making the purchase.
If you give me 30 seconds, I'll rattle off 10 familiar friction points. And then you go to West Africa. Is that okay? So I don't
Great,
miss. All right, so
go.
here we go. Voicemail prompts, friction. Batteries not included, friction. Password protection, there's friction. Medical appointments, oh my God, friction.
Mhm.
Software auto updates when you're doing something important or on a webinar, friction. Parking space search, I already talked about that, friction. Amusement park lines, friction. Reordering supplies, hey, where's the number? Friction. Car dealership purchases other than Tesla, friction. And Google and YouTube ads, unless you pay the 16 to 18 bucks, there's friction because shit gets in the way of you watching, right?
Yep,
So
yep.
go ahead, West Africa.
So in your bio,
Yes,
thought leaders for teaching students from evolving nations, third world, how to profit from first world digital marketing strategies.
yes,
So what does that look like for you? How have you gone into third world spaces
sure.
and helped them profit from first world digital marketing strategies?
Well, it wasn't specifically West Africa, but it was third world throughout the world. So Latin America, Tanzania, which parts of Africa, and then parts of Asia, such as Indonesia and Malaysia. So I was the first American, and I think even it doesn't matter, but Caucasian, someone looking like me, and people treated the whole process of differences differently back in 2002. So back in 2002, I was the first to teach digital marketing in Asia. So I was flown out there by my host, and you don't point in Asia. So you don't go like this. That's rude. I'm pointing. You go like this with your hands. And then they do two things that we do terribly in the United States. They honor their elderly. We put them in old folks' homes, and they honor their teachers. We throw shit at them. Okay.
Mhm.
So I love the Asian mindset. Now, third world, Malaysia, third world, Indonesia, Vietnam, Myanmar, which is Burma, one of the richest nations of all time, and they ransacked it. India, most of India is third world. I've taught there 3 times. And then I've taught in South Africa, which is third world. They do have metropolitan like Joburg, Johannesburg, and Cape Town, beautiful cities, but very, very high crime rate. And the crime is not white against black; it's black against black. It's mind-boggling, what goes on. It's horrible. And so I'm not going to talk conspiracy of do the governments get involved in this, or is there aggression just so the people are afraid of each other? That's none of my business. What's my business is if I could take stuff that's 3 years old and teach it to people who have never seen it before in their lives, and that looks like it's new, and then they start making money, then I can teach them stuff that's more up to date. Now, the reason I can't teach them up to date stuff is because they don't have the infrastructure or the platforms to do it.
Mhm.
So, my secret, and it was just logic, is I taught stuff that was 3 to 4 years old, and I would go in and I would teach them, and I would actually care about them and coach them. I would have a interpreter in real time, simultaneous interpretation, 4 different languages: Mandarin, Vietnamese, Burmese, um, and Thai. And then, of course, then we had Russian and German and Spanish and French when I went to Europe. And I became the first world marketer to third world nations, and I felt great. And I raised over $500,000 through kiva.org.
Mhm.
And I got to meet the people when I went to Mount Kilimanjaro. Most of them were in Tanzania. And these women, these weavers and basket makers and stuff. And
Yeah.
they were just getting loans of $200 and $250, and they would repay them for a change. Like
Yeah.
90% would repay, 85 to 90% would repay, which we don't. And then I would recycle it. And that recycling over 10 years was $500,000 in loans. So I didn't do it because it was the right thing to do. I did it because I just thought, wow, selfishly, some of these folks are going to turn out to be multimillionaires. And they did.
Mhm.
So, I don't tell the truth. I stood up one time at a mastermind very recently, and we were talking about our superpowers. What's your superpower? What's your kryptonite? And I stood up. I said, my superpower is telling the truth. And
Mhm.
everyone goes, ho, 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 ho. I go, no, I'm serious. Telling the truth, because nothing is persuasive as the truth. I don't tell the truth because my mom said that was the right thing to do. I tell the truth because I make more money telling the truth. You can smell a white lie,
Yeah.
and that's how you can count on what I'm saying is true, because I'm
Mhm.
doing it for the money, not for you. So that's a really nice reframe in not only telling the truth, but I don't need a good memory when I tell the truth.
Right.
So everything you've heard is the truth according to sources that I've double and triple checked.
And when you're having a conversation specifically for the money, it sounds like you're very honest and very direct about that.
I tell them up front. I tell them
Mhm.
up front. So let's look at some great companies have key friction points that everyone here, consumer or business person, has experienced. And these companies have eliminated these counterintuitive key friction points, or CFPs, from their CX. And CX, if you look it up on Google, means the customer experience. It's just short for
Mhm.
that. So Amazon, how do they remove most of the friction in their buying process? One-click buying and staying logged in.
Right.
Massive,
My credit card's there, my address is already
everything.
there. Yep.
One-click buying and staying logged in. Number two, Apple stores. Okay. No register lines. There's no registers. Little people come up to you and they go, "What would you like?" And next thing you know, you spent 4 grand, right?
Yeah.
Uber, Uber. There's no managing the fare expectation, FARE, from taxi. No wait times. You know exactly, because of the Uber app, where the Uber is. Is it always a great experience? Not really, but it tells you where they are, and it's completely disrupted the taxi business. And then
Yeah.
Tesla. Tesla, for a $500 deposit, You can get your car delivered at home. It takes you less than 20 minutes to buy a car. If you want a third row in your SUV for a Volkswagen, that's 4.5 hours in a Volkswagen dealership. For Tesla, it's 20 minutes and you got to wait another month to get it.
That's so
Tesla is the most
fascinating.
valuable car company in the world. It's also the youngest. It's less than 15 years old. The oldest company is Mercedes-Benz. Tesla is the youngest. The biggest is Toyota, right? Up to before Tesla, and Tesla just clobbers Toyota. Okay, that's how powerful Tesla is. For example, market cap. That's how big it can get. Tesla is 2.5 times bigger than Toyota. Okay, Tesla is 7 times bigger than Mercedes Benz.
Wow.
Tesla is 8 times bigger than Volkswagen and 9 times bigger than BMW. And Tesla's been around for 14 to 15 years. Why? Because Elon Musk, love him or loathe him, got rid of the friction.
Not for me.
Well, that's up to you. But
Right.
I happen to like him. I happen to like
Well,
him.
I mean, my friction, this has nothing to do with fact, and it has everything to do with I feel the electricity in the vehicle. I don't like the way it feels in my body.
Yeah, well,
And that friction, there's
that's an
nothing that
issue.
Tesla could do to remove.
There's nothing. And then I'll tell you something else about these combustion engine people. A electric car produces more carbon before the car is made
Hmm.
than a combustion engine produces while it's still on the road, which is the most ridiculous thing on earth. And Tesla knows that, right?
Yeah,
So when they talk about everything going to electric, first of all, we can't support the electric grid. Secondly, we're at high risk because the government can shut off the electric grid and we can't go anywhere,
right,
right? It's centralized. And third, everything that's getting mined produces all this carbon up front, and no one talks about that.
right.
That's friction.
Well, and what about the oil industry? They're going to fight hard. Anyway, I am aware you have somewhere else to be. I'm
Yep.
curious for people that are like, whoa, mind blown, learning a lot, want to learn more. I want to hire you, Alex. How do I hire you to help me as my fractional CFO? Can you just tell listeners what are you up to today? How do
Yep.
they find you if they want to lean in and learn more, have a conversation with you? What's available?
Okay. So I will start by saying this is not a takeaway, which is a sales technique. This is the truth. So I am not for hire because there's a waiting list for about 8 months, and it's inexpensive. And what I just talked about, you can do on your own. So I don't recommend you buy anything from me or hire me. I do recommend you go to allsellingaside.com, and there are 120 plus episodes on virtually every topic possible in the area of business and storytelling. I believe storytelling removes friction from the buying process. A
Mhm.
story has a who, it has a what, it has a when, it has a why, it has a how.
It has a
And
third orbiting body.
well, they don't know what that means, but yes, it does.
That's an inside thing between Alex and I
That
from
is,
our
and you saw
time.
me. I have the video of that, and you saw me do the third gravitating body for Hey Jude. You saw that.
Yeah,
That was
I
one of a
did.
kind.
Yeah. Yeah. We had time with Roy Williams when we were in Austin. So that's the
Yeah.
reference point.
And if I ever came back, I can talk about third gravitating bodies. But don't buy anything from me, and don't hire me. But do visit allsellingaside.com because it's a free podcast. You're watching, listening, reading the podcast. So you might as well go to another one. And if you like what you heard here, you're going to like that even more. And you're a great host. They don't say
Thank you.
hostess anymore. They don't say actress anymore. You're a great host, Maraya. And I hope our paths cross again soon. I can come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was so fun that I bumped into um, Jason Campbell on the train in Sedona.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm definitely, our paths are crossing in various ways, and I'm sure this is just the beginning. I appreciate you. Thank you again for opening your doors for me to join Pathfinder Mastermind this last October.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today in gracing all of us with all of these various ways to kind of expand these ideas of friction as a silent assassin of business growth, but really growth in general.
Correct. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Hmm. And I appreciate you. Thank you to all the listeners, obviously, for your time and for your open minds, and hopefully you've gleaned a great deal.